Welcome to CBC Windsor News at 6. I'm Meg Roberts. Thanks so much for spending part of your evening with us tonight. Well, a storm last night has left parts of Harrow underwater, as well as other regions in southern Ontario. We have all your coverage tonight and a look at more wet weather on the way. Plus, protected land is expanding in Essex County. We hear from a family passionate about conservation and why they decided to make their land public. And the city is facing a bus driver shortage, and one of the reasons why may surprise you. Well, we begin tonight with major flooding in the southern part of the county. 190 millimeters of rain fell overnight, filling up basements and causing road closures. Officials are also worried about dangerous levels of water in rivers and ditches. Dale Mullner has more from some of the hardest hit areas.
The storm put on a light and sound show last night that lasted most of the night. Parts of Harrow and Colchester got the most rain, about 7 inches, or 178 millimeters. County Road 50 was closed at Erie Road, and Mayor Sherry Bondi says there are other numerous road closures.
A lot of roads in Harrow. We have Wellington Street, the main road, County Road 20, Arthur in Harrow, Sunset Street in Harrow, Roseboro in Harrow, County Road 20 in Colchester was one of the hardest hit.
The Essex Region Conservation Area is out surveying to see what kind of damage there is. They are also warning residents to stay away from the overflowing ditches and drains.
We're all bankful, and we've got another potential 1 to 2 inches in the forecast tonight. So if we do get that, I mean, the ground's already saturated. It will exacerbate conditions out there. So we're monitoring that closely.
Bryant says a south wind is blowing water from Lake Erie back up into the drains, making it difficult for the water to drain away.
How are you?
Bonnie was out driving around the municipality today, talking to residents and checking out the flooding.
That's the power of the water that was coming through here that could bend steel stakes.
Wow.
So that's how strong it is.
The water poured over this part of County Road 50 when the drain overflowed. It was so high it washed stones away from the roadbed and left it compromised.
Oh yeah, everything's washed. That gravel was not there yesterday. It's come from up here. It's all come from up here.
So any basements over here?
Residents of Lips Beach down the road were also flooded heavily.
How much water inside your basement?
Oh geez, feet's worth. Yeah, 3 feet. I would say about 3 feet. Yeah, we're just started to pump it out right now. So, yeah.
Our sanitary system in Harrow is really full right now with this storm surge of 7 inches of water overnight. So even that system is not working as we need it in this kind of storm.
Here in McGregor, you can see that this drain has overflowed its banks by several feet. And across the street, there's an entire neighborhood where there's flooded basements and a major flooded street. So much water at the Hidden Creek subdivision, Bondi is asking people not to drive down streets like this because it causes wakes that splash up against houses.
We got water coming out of our shower. The whole sewer system seems to be backed up. My neighbors have the same thing going on.
Bondi would like to see the town more prepared for events like this one.
For example, can we get a host of sandbags and bring that program back again? We had that program before. Maybe that's something we can do as part of a municipality to help individuals.
More rain is expected tonight. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Essex.
Well, we're going to go straight to Nick Cernkovich, who's watching the weather for us. Nick, as we just heard from Dale, people are seeing the impacts today of all that rain. And I got a notification on my phone that indicates we aren't out of the troubling weather yet. What can you tell people about the forecast?
Yeah, we're not. We had a rainfall warning earlier on. That's now being shifted to a severe thunderstorm watch, and I'm going to explain that to you in a second here, but we're certainly not done with this wet weather just yet. Here's a look at what happened yesterday. So basically, as this warm front swept through, lines of showers and thunderstorms, and you'll notice that they kind of persist in one area for an extended period of time, and that's why we saw flooding. Now, some areas getting hit harder than others, as you saw. Harrow coming in at 178 millimeters of rainfall. And that was probably one of the hardest hit areas that we had. So this is certainly a problem for us now. Harrow was 178. Pelee Island, we had amounts of 171 millimeters of rainfall. And other areas getting hit similarly, Windsor at 88 millimeters of rain. Now, in terms of the forecast, what we're expecting here is another 20 to potentially 50 millimeters of rain because of this. There are severe thunderstorm watches that are in effect, and there is highly unstable air in southwestern Ontario. We're expecting to see more of these thunderstorms being triggered as we move into the evening hours tonight. I'm going to have more on that coming up in just a bit, Meg, because this is not just wet weather now, but we're also talking about severe thunderstorms as well.
Well, thanks so much for that, Nick. We'll check in with you a little later on in the show. Well, this once-in-a-century rainfall has contributed to the death of a truck driver near London. One person was killed after their vehicle fell into this sinkhole here on Dundonald Road in Glencoe. Officials say it's 3 meters deep. Just over 135 millimeters of rain fell during a very short period of time. That rain also temporarily closed Highway 402 for more than 12 hours overnight. It has since been reopened. Well, that storm last night certainly leaving widespread damage all the way from Warwick Township to Tilbury and here to the most southern part of the country. These are images of Peely Island. The island received about 7 inches of water. The mayor saying it's the worst flooding she's seen in 15 years. She says the pump houses will be running 24/7 for the next 3 to 5 days, especially with the rain predicted in the forecast. And our American neighbors also not escaping the floods. This was the scene in Metro Detroit earlier today. Many roads completely underwater, making it difficult to get around and causing backups at intersections. Some vehicles were even submerged. 5 Metro Detroit counties were under a flood warning at the height of the storm. Officials estimated roughly 150 millimeters of rain fell in Metro Detroit by 7 this morning. Well, Transit Windsor has a bus driver shortage. They say wages and the current job market makes hiring tricky. There's also unique rules that Windsor drivers have to follow because of the tunnel bus route, which officials say may create a barrier.
There's issues like, for example, the drug test comes back positive, then the level of testing, the frequency of testing increases as a result. When you operate into the United States, no different than highway coach or even trucking, you are at the behest of U.S. rules and regulations in that respect. So, that's why there's the passport requirement. That's why there's the requirement for drug and alcohol testing, because that is part of the U.S. Department of Transportation's program. So if you want to enter the U.S., you have to play by their rules.
Transit Windsor says they're short about 20 drivers and they rely on existing staff to work overtime to fill the gaps. Officials say ridership levels have unexpectedly hit record highs. That's since they returned to full service last September following the pandemic, with university and college tuition-based pass programs leading the charge. Now, under its new service plan, Transit Windsor is adding 18,000 new hours, a lot of that time going towards the semi-express route along Tecumseh Road that connects the west and east end terminals with stops at the university. Essex County is known for its vast farmland, a booming agriculture sector with deep roots in our area. But before those fields grew corn and tomatoes, they were home to native species now at risk of extinction. The CBC's Chris Ensing with a look at one family's restoration efforts and their decision to leave the land in the hands of the public.
This beautiful oasis.
Wonderful to be here.
A backdrop for a podium flanked by politicians, each one admiring this part of Essex County's pristine beauty.
We love our natural areas.
Both levels of government helping to pay for parts of this. Nearly $1 million from the federal government paired with just over $500,000 from the province. 50 hectares of forests and wetlands now under the stewardship of the Nature Conservancy of Canada.
So here we are today, taking yet another giant, bold step when it comes to conservation of our land and our waters.
Private donations also helping secure a vital area.
We are in what's called the Carolinian Zone, in a special ecosystem that represents about 1% of Canada's landmass, but supports 25% of our species at risk.
But there's nothing to protect without this man and his family. Orfeo Lucchesi bought the property decades ago, restoring it from farmland.
It's almost like a child, the transformation over the 25 years has been amazing.
The Italian immigrant transformed this ecosystem into a vibrant forest, planting native plants that provide food for vital pollinators.
And obviously we talk about pollinators and lots of pollinators and trying to save the bees, and these are exactly the kinds of things that are really important for saving the bees, because they'll be used by all kinds of native bees and other species to complete their life cycles and to feed their babies.
But not just bees. This pink swamp rose mallow is a special concern, according to the Ontario government. It flowers for only a few days and at just 50 sites across Ontario, including this wetland. The Upper Cedar Creek Reserve, also home to one of the province's rarest birds, the eastern wood pewee. This bird of special concern in the province. Ontario's Ministry of Environment saying it's threatened by urban development, and the insects it eats are now thinning out. Its habitat here protected.
When my dad first purchased this property, most of this was just field, and so he got a bunch of trees from the Ministry of Natural Resources, and we all planted the trees, over 200 trees.
There's still signs of Lucchese's life here. A cabin that fit bunk beds, his daughter recalling the pride her father put into these woods.
He just had a true love and affinity for the wilderness.
These trees now towering above the former farm field with signs of new life, building on what he's left behind.
You know, not many people can say that they leave such a legacy, and what a remarkable legacy your father's leaving behind for future generations to come. So know that, and we thank you for that.
It was his push to preserve native species that make this patch so valuable. Lucchese's daughter says this plot of land being purchased for permanent conservation would make her father happy.
He didn't take it for granted. He was always very interested. We couldn't go walking in a forest without him quizzing us on the trees.
She adds everyone should just do what they can to keep areas as natural as possible.
You know, plant indigenous plants and trees and try to enjoy even in your own small space. It doesn't have to be acres.
Chris Ensing, CBC News, Essex.
Well, one of Canada's most wanted persons has been extradited back to Canada. That's to make a court appearance where he will face a first-degree murder trial. 27-year-old Malik Kalu was arrested in Michigan by the U.S. Marshals Service last month. That's in connection to the shooting death of a 24-year-old man in Windsor in November. That happened on Hannah Street. Windsor police said they took the accused into custody at the border yesterday. Well, there are early suggestions of a rise in COVID-19 cases across the country. Positive tests and hospitalizations are on the uptick as drug makers seek approval for new vaccines. But updated booster shots likely remain several weeks away. CBC's Lauren Pelly has the latest.
I don't want to get sick.
59-year-old Edwina Thomas got her last COVID vaccine almost a year ago. With infection rates rising again, she wants another shot before going back to her job as a school librarian.
I think it's just going to go through us like a tidal wave.
But federal officials say it could still be several weeks before updated shots are approved and rolling out to the provinces.
It is a difficult period, there is no doubt.
Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Teresa Tam says anytime there are new vaccine formulations, Health Canada has to make sure they're both safe and effective.
And that process takes time.
The guidance for most Canadians is to simply wait for the newest versions. They're more tailored to the virus variants circulating right now.
Just waiting is difficult, irritating, uncertain, but still the best thing to do.
This physician recommends spacing out your next shot 6 months or so after your last vaccine or infection. That's because even though antibodies to ward off reinfection will fade over time, deeper protection against serious illness will last longer.
Those of us who've had, 4, 5, 6 doses of vaccine, and most of us have had an infection by now, are pretty well protected.
But that advice isn't one size fits all. Experts say anyone who is pregnant, older adults, or people with other serious health issues may benefit from having another shot sooner, and healthcare providers should consider those requests.
People who are at especially high risk of severe outcomes may wish to consult their physician about whether or not the risk-benefit equation sways for them towards getting an earlier but older shot in advance of a new wave popping up.
Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
A telecommunications service failure in a small community in the Northwest Territories led to the late evacuation of residents. The government wanted Kakisa residents to move away from approaching forest fires, but they never got the message to leave. Juanita Taylor has the reaction from the rural hamlet.
The streets of Kakisa are empty now that most of its 40 residents have left. An evacuation delayed, explains the chief.
No, we didn't hear about it. We didn't know until we'd seen on the TV.
An evacuation order was issued for Kakisa on August 17, but people here didn't learn about it that day. That's because their telecommunication system was down.
We didn't see no smoke and no fire, so there was no, to us, there was no emergency at the time.
Evacuees from Kakisa were expected in Fort Simpson, 320 kilometers away. After 24 hours when no one was showing up, the mayor of Fort Providence, an hour's drive to Kakisa, was asked to check what was going on.
I drove down and I talked to them, and they said, well, no one told them they're supposed to evacuate.
Turns out the fire had destroyed the fiber optic line that Kakisa relies on for internet, cell service, and phone lines. The wildfire of 2014 came very close to burning Kakisa to ashes. This one is 14 kilometers away, and a handful of residents aren't leaving, including Ryan Moore.
I'm not going away.
He's chosen to stay and to try to protect his community.
We're doing some fire breaks here, and there's not many people around town, so we only have limited labor around here. It's a small community, so just do my part.
Caroline Wozniak is the territory's finance minister.
That's what brought us down last Sunday. We didn't have the redundancy. It's something that we continue to push for so that we can find the funding to get there.
Those who stayed behind are keeping their eyes on the sky. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Kakisa, Northwest Territories.
Well, the storm last night has reminded some residents of flooding events that happened decades ago. Coming up, we go back in the archives before taking a look at the weather forecast. Well, we've seen lots of comments online comparing the flooding in the county to the 1989 floods. A storm dumped 450 millimeters or 17 inches of rain on Harrow and Colchester area. Rain was falling at 30 millimeters an hour at one point overnight. 2,000 homes were flooded and 20 basements collapsed. We went way back into our archives to find CBC Windsor's original story on the flood.
They waded through knee-deep water to get to safety. 500 people fled their homes in southwestern Ontario as the rain turned neighborhoods into lakes.
We had to help people out of their houses because they couldn't get out of the basements and everything. It's just been horrible.
260 millimeters, more than 10 inches of rain has fallen in the past 24 hours, drenching the southernmost part of Ontario. 2 freight cars toppled off their tracks about 60 kilometers from Windsor. The rail bed was washed away. Nearby farms were evacuated because the train was carrying ammonia gas. Damage to homes is expected to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And what's worse, it's supposed to rain all night here, and many fear more flooding is yet to come.
Well, despite that being a piece that aired 34 years ago, residents today are feeling that exact same worry. Now to join us is Nick Cernkovich, who we already know is going to deliver some bad news. Nick, what are we in for?
Yeah, I'd say so. Meg, I mentioned earlier on that we have severe thunderstorm watches in effect in southwestern Ontario, including Windsor and Harrow, and this is what they look like right now. The reason for this is we're actually expecting more in the way of thunderstorms to develop through the overnight period, or rather the evening hours tonight and last into the overnight. Not seeing much just yet, but just through sort of upper Michigan, we're beginning to develop these thunderstorms and a lot of instability in the atmosphere. We've got heat, we've got humidity, and we've got a little bit of shear, and all of these things come together and play to give us severe weather. So there is not just the potential for heavy rainfall here, but damaging winds, hail, and isolated risk of tornadoes as well. So that's something we've got to watch heading into the evening tonight. It's part of this system. As it develops rather quickly. And one thing you'll notice is this, and this is a forecast model, by the way, this sort of Boeing structure here. Now, just the fact that the models are picking up on that is indicative of severe weather and indicative of very strong winds. So it is something we've got to watch. I do think we've got a very good chance of seeing severe thunderstorms as we head through the next few hours tonight. By tomorrow, though, it does clear out. But before that, upwards to about 50 millimeters of rain or more locally in some areas to add to what we've already seen. And a lot of this is going to be concentrated in southwestern Ontario. By Friday evening, things begin to clear out. A few isolated showers into Saturday there. And Saturday afternoon, again, a few isolated showers or some cloud cover, and then starting to clear out by Sunday. Sunday looks to be the best of the weekend days. I mentioned that rainfall. Now, don't take these numbers at face value. And the reason is when we're talking about thunderstorms, they're very local. So often, you know, this model will pick up 55 millimeters in Chatham-Kent. It might not be right there, but generally speaking, we're looking at 25 to 50 plus millimeters of rain being fueled by heat. There's the temperatures and humidity as well. There you go, Sarnia with a humidex of 39 at this point. So that is part of the ingredients that we're looking at when we're talking about severe weather. And so there is an enhanced risk for severe weather. We've got the watches in effect, but this is something to keep an eye on as we head through at least till about the midnight hour or even a little bit past that as well. And when these develop, they are expected to develop rather quickly. So not seeing them yet, but we're just starting to see some of them pop up around northern Michigan, and then we expect them to move through fairly quickly. Temperatures through the overnight, generally around the 20s here. Humidex value is still also very mild as well, or very warm or high. Tomorrow, we've still got a little bit in the way of humidity, 26 degrees. A few rain showers starting to clear out there. Now, I know that doesn't look great. It's not a lot of rain for tomorrow. We're talking about isolated showers. 26 degrees into Saturday as well. Sunday, we've got some sunshine. Looks pretty good. Monday as well. Tuesday, again, a bit unsettled. Meg.
Well, Nick, we're going to stay hopeful for tonight, that's for sure. Thank you so much for that.
You bet.
Well, a decision by the Japanese government about the water from Fukushima has people inside and outside the country protesting. We'll tell you more coming up. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to turn himself in to authorities at a jailhouse in Georgia tonight. He's facing criminal charges related to alleged efforts to overturn his 2020 election defeat in the state.
He's an American hero.
Supporters and detractors gathered near the jail in Atlanta amid heightened security. Trump faces 13 criminal counts, including violating the state's anti-racketeering laws. Some of his 18 co-defendants have already been booked, including former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Trump has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing. The former U.S. president has been indicted in 4 separate criminal cases now. Well, Japan has started releasing treated radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean. Over the next 16 days, 7,800 cubic meters of wastewater will be pumped from the destroyed Fukushima nuclear plant into the ocean about a kilometer from shore. The Japanese government announced the plan earlier this week. Today's initial discharge triggered protests inside and outside Japan. Other governments in the region, including China and South Korea, have banned seafood products from Japan. The release of the treated wastewater has been approved by the UN's International Atomic Energy Agency and is expected to take about 30 years to complete. Well, that's it for CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, you can go to our website. Thanks so much for tuning in. Looking forward to seeing you back here tomorrow night.